Welcome back to another episode of HealthCap Weekly Wrap. Today's episode is packed with insight. From the risks of skipping critical depression screenings to new strategies for managing blood pressure, promoting physical activity, and mindful eating. We're also diving into regulatory guidance and wrapping up with some of the most creative innovations happening in senior living today. Some of the resources we're discussing have been out for a year or more, and we'll flag those when we get to them, but the lessons are still fresh and valuable.
Let's start with a story that really caught our attention from Stat News. It's about the PHQ-9 depression screening tool, which you're probably familiar with. It's a standard survey used across healthcare to assess depression. But here's the shocking part. Some providers are choosing to skip the last question on that form. That's question 9, the one that asks whether someone has had thoughts of harming themselves.
And the reason they're skipping it? Fear of liability. If a resident says yes, the provider has a legal obligation to act, whether that means further assessment, documentation, or even emergency intervention. For some organizations, that liability is viewed as too big a risk, so they quietly leave that question off.
And that's incredibly dangerous. It undermines the entire purpose of the screening. The PHQ-9 is designed to catch signs of depression and suicidality early before it becomes a crisis. Removing that question turns a clinical tool into a checkbox and, frankly, a false sense of security.
The article goes beyond just the legal implications. It points out that older adults are already at greater risk of underdiagnosed depression. Many are reluctant to bring up emotional distress. If we stop asking, we stop knowing. And if we stop knowing, we stop helping.
This story is a wake-up call. For senior living leaders, it's a moment to ask, are we screening effectively? Are we following through on what we find? And are we letting fear of litigation interfere with care?
That theme, what happens when we skip critical steps, comes up again in our next story. Medscape published an infographic summarizing the 2024 ACC/AHA blood pressure guidelines. It's a visual reference, but the content behind it is significant, especially for older adults.
Here's the big update. If someone's blood pressure is 130/80 or higher, and it doesn't respond after 3 to 6 months of lifestyle changes like diet and exercise, then it's time to begin antihypertensive medication. But if that person has diabetes, chronic kidney disease, or a high 10-year risk of heart disease, they should start medication right away. No trial period.
And that shift makes sense. Research increasingly shows that elevated blood pressure is not just about strokes or heart attacks, it's also linked to dementia. The infographic makes that connection clearly, outlining lifestyle changes that can reduce both cardiovascular and cognitive risks.
We're talking about reducing salt, staying physically active, losing weight, managing stress, and, this is a key one, taking medications consistently. It's a holistic approach and one that directly applies to daily life in senior living communities.
They also include alcohol guidance. While the official daily limits remain at 1 drink for women and 2 for men, the infographic is clear. If you're trying to manage hypertension, not drinking at all is best. That might be a difficult conversation to have, especially in communities where social hours or wine with dinner are a big part of the culture. But it's worth talking through with residents and families.
The infographic also flags screening for primary aldosteronism in residents with resistant hypertension, even if they don't show classic signs like low potassium. That's an often missed diagnosis, and it's a reminder to stay vigilant with residents who aren't responding to the usual treatment.
So we've covered 2 areas, mental health and blood pressure, where better screening can make a big difference. Now let's talk about one of the root causes, inactivity. And for that, we're turning to a report from the Mather Institute that came out back in 2021. Yes, it's a few years old, but the report, called Stumbling Blocks, is still incredibly relevant.
The focus is on why so many older adults don't participate in physical activity, even when programs are available. And the reasons are not what you might think. The report highlights barriers like fear of falling, fear of pain, and even fear of embarrassment. Some residents feel overwhelmed by group classes or believe they're too far gone to start moving again.
It really reframes the conversation. Instead of viewing inactivity as a lack of motivation, it presents it as a natural reaction to perceived risk. and that means it's something we can address.
The report suggests small, approachable changes. Think about reframing exercise as movement. Invite residents to walk during conversation, garden, or stretch in their rooms. It also emphasizes the language staff use. A gentle, "Would you like to help me set the tables?" may get a better response than, "You need to be more active."
There's also value in peer modeling. Residents are more likely to join in if they see their peers doing it first, and if the environment is welcoming and inclusive. This isn't about gym memberships, it's about confidence, connection, and dignity.
Now let's turn to something that feels especially relevant right now, with Thanksgiving just around the corner, and that's mindful eating. The Mather Institute released a flyer on this topic earlier this year. It's a short visual resource, but it's packed with value, especially as we head into a season that tends to center around food.
The core idea behind mindful eating is slowing down and really paying attention to what and how we're eating. The flyer encourages residents to chew thoroughly, pause between bites, notice flavors and textures, and recognize the difference between physical hunger and emotional eating.
And it's not about limiting enjoyment, it's about enhancing it. Especially during holidays, meals can become overwhelming. There's more food, more emotion, more social pressure. Helping residents feel empowered to eat with intention, not guilt or urgency, can make the experience more meaningful.
It also opens the door for great programming. Maybe your dining team could host a mindful tasting the week of Thanksgiving, focusing on savoring holiday spices or trying seasonal dishes in smaller, more intentional portions, or even let a conversation with residents about food memories tied to gratitude and celebration.
Plus, mindful eating has real health benefits: improved digestion, reduced stress, and better blood sugar control. For residents managing chronic conditions, or even just navigating changes in appetite, it's a helpful low-pressure tool.
So, whether your community is hosting a full traditional dinner or a simple gathering, this flyer is a great resource to have on hand. It's not just about eating less, it's about enjoying more.
Now let's pull the lens back a little further. The Mather Institute released their next Volume 3 report earlier this year, and it's all about the future of aging. What's changing, what's emerging, and how senior living communities can stay ahead of the curve.
This report looks globally at trends in aging. Topics include personalized medicine, wearable tech, AI-enabled health tracking, sustainability, and even new models of communal living. It's not just tech for tech's sake, it's about how innovation can serve well-being.
One particularly interesting section focuses on pet ownership. Not just allowing pets, but incorporating animal relationships into the wellness model through pet therapy, shared responsibility programs, and even design features that accommodate animals. The emotional benefits are huge: lower blood pressure, increased joy, reduced loneliness.
There are also stories about how communities are reimagining their dining environments, programming schedules, and even building layouts to reflect what today's and tomorrow's older adults want. Not just what's been done traditionally.
It's the kind of report that leadership teams can use for strategic planning, innovation workshops, or simply as inspiration. The future is closer than we think.
But of course, with all of that innovation comes responsibility. So let's talk about a white paper released by LW Consulting. It's titled Navigating Legal and Regulatory Risk in Senior Living, and it provides an excellent overview of how to build a culture of compliance.
What this paper really emphasizes is that risk exposure often stems from small missteps: poor documentation, inconsistent training, or unclear follow-up processes. These aren't dramatic failures. They're the little things that stack up.
And these small cracks in the system become big problems in the eyes of regulators or attorneys. The paper makes a strong case for internal audits, scenario training, and building systems that empower staff to do the right thing every time.
It also encourages leadership to review their communication pathways. Are staff comfortable reporting concerns? Are families informed about care practices? Is there clarity on what happens after an incident or an audit?
And again, it ties back to where we started. Skipping that one question on a PHQ-9 may seem like a shortcut, but it can open the door to risk, both for the resident and the organization.
Let's wrap things up on a hopeful note. Each year, the Mather Institute publishes its Innovative Research on Aging Awards, And the 2024 edition did not disappoint. These award-winning studies are selected not just for academic quality, but for their practical application in senior living.
One standout project used virtual reality to increase resident participation in physical activity. Residents who didn't want to join traditional classes were much more engaged when the activity became an immersive, game-like experience. Another program used arts-based therapy to improve cognition in adults with mild cognitive decline.
There were also several studies focused on social connection. One used community storytelling to help residents share life experiences and reduce isolation. Another explored structured pet therapy visits for residents with advanced memory loss and saw meaningful increases in engagement and effect.
These aren't just nice ideas. They're measurable, scalable, and already being used in communities around the country. They're proof that innovation doesn't have to be flashy. It just has to be meaningful.
Thanks for tuning into this week's HealthCap Weekly Wrap. If any of these stories sparked ideas for your team, or if you want to explore the full resources, head over to Angie's blog at healthcapusa.com/Angie's blog. As always, we'll be back next week with more stories that matter to senior living. Take care.